17-year-old Ava Robinson was used to grand storefronts and high-end boutiques. After all, her father, Michael Robinson, was a prominent entrepreneur who owned a string of luxury fashion stores across the state. But on this particular Saturday afternoon, Ava wasn't thinking about her father's influence or anyone's net worth. She just wanted to find the perfect dress for an important charity gala. It was her first time shopping alone in Robinson & Co. boutique, and she felt a flutter of excitement at the thought of making an independent choice without her dad's usual guidance. Little did she know, this trip would unravel in ways she never anticipated. A quiet tension was brewing the moment she walked in, and one woman's prejudiced assumptions would soon turn a simple shopping trip into a public showdown. And in true American spirit, if you believe no one should be judged unfairly based on appearance, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories that champion justice. Ava stepped into the boutique with a mix of confidence and curiosity. The interior was every bit as luxurious as she remembered. Polished floors that reflected the dazzling chandeliers overhead, racks of designer gowns spaced a few feet apart for easy browsing, and plush seating areas where customers could relax. Since she was accustomed to seeing these stores in the company of her father, strolling in alone felt like a milestone. She could almost feel the tingle of independence coursing through her veins. She had saved her allowance for this very moment. Well, part of it came from her father, part from her own babysitting gigs on weekends, and she was determined to make a purchase on her own terms. Outside, the sky was a crisp blue, and a warm breeze hinted at spring. Inside, soft instrumental music played overhead, punctuated by the hum of quiet chatter from the other shoppers. Ava ran her fingertips over a shimmering gold cocktail dress on display. It was beautiful, but not quite the right style. She made her way further into the store, pausing at a dress with intricate lace sleeves. She knew her father's charity gala deserved something both elegant and youthful. As she scanned the racks, she found a promising contender in a deep navy color. But just as she started to admire the delicate beading, she felt a pair of eyes drilling into her from across the room. Across from Ava stood Mrs. Harriet Harrington, a woman known by many for her flamboyant hats, sharp tongue, and even sharper gaze. Harriet had frequented Robinson & Co. boutique for years, always acting as though she was part owner. She treated sales associates like personal servants and other customers like unwanted guests in her private domain. Today, Harriet looked particularly on edge. She clutched an expensive handbag with rigid precision, her manicured nails tapping impatiently against the leather. When she first noticed Ava, her brow furrowed. Then she narrowed her eyes, as though Ava's presence alone offended her. In Harriet's mind, the boutique was no place for this young woman, someone she instantly decided didn't belong. At first, Harriet merely muttered her disapproval to herself. But as Ava's shopping continued, Harriet's resentment grew. She glided behind Ava through the aisles, trying to catch her in some act of wrongdoing. No suspicious behavior appeared, which only seemed to fuel Harriet's frustration. Ava was oblivious to Harriet's stalking at first. She had finally found a breathtaking silver dress in the right size. She lifted it gently, feeling the fabric between her fingers. It seemed perfect for the gala, sophisticated yet fresh enough for a teenager. A flicker of excitement brightened Ava's face. But just as she headed to the fitting rooms, Harriet hissed to another nearby customer, "I bet she's not even buying anything. She's just here to loiter." The other customer, visibly uncomfortable, offered a quick nod, but then busied herself rummaging through a rack to avoid Harriet's stare. Harriet's voice carried, though, loud enough for others to overhear. A few curious glances fell on Ava, though she remained blissfully unaware for now. She stepped into the fitting room with her silver dress, closed the door, and slipped into it. The mirror on the back of the door reflected the image of a confident, poised young woman. Ava smiled, imagining herself walking into the gala arm in arm with her father. This was the first year she was old enough to truly appreciate the significance of the event. It wasn't just about glitz and glamour. It was about raising funds for community scholarships. When Ava emerged from the fitting room, Harriet's gaze locked onto her. Ava's face glowed with the excitement of finding the right dress, but Harriet's scowl deepened. "Nice dress," Harriet said, her tone saccharine sweet with a hidden edge. Ava, polite by nature, responded with a friendly smile. "Thank you. I think it's perfect for my dad's charity gala next month." Harriet's brows arched at the mention of a charity gala. "Is that so?" she asked, crossing her arms. The faux smile slipped from her face. "Are you sure you can afford that dress?" Ava blinked. "I'm here to shop just like everyone else," she said, her voice steady. The question irritated her, but she kept her composure. "If you have a problem, maybe you should take it up with the store manager." Harriet's lip curled. "Oh, don't worry," she said coldly, stepping aside. "I fully intend to." Ava felt a prick of anxiety in her stomach. She had encountered rudeness in the past, but never in such an overtly condescending way. Still, she lifted her chin and held her ground, silently refusing to let Harriet's sneer chip away at her dignity. The small crowd that had formed around them watched with hushed curiosity. Whispers scuttled across the room, and the tension felt thick as August humidity. Meanwhile, Miss Sorensen, the recently hired store manager, hovered near a display of high-heeled shoes. She seemed uneasy, unsure how to intervene. Harriet marched toward Miss Sorensen, snapping her fingers as though summoning an attendant. "Excuse me," she barked, pointing at Ava. "That girl is acting suspiciously. I've seen her slip something into her bag. You need to check her immediately." A startled hush swept through the store. Ava's eyes went wide with disbelief. Around her, a few customers exchanged doubtful looks, while others seemed intrigued by Harriet's claim. Miss Sorensen hesitated. She didn't recognize Ava as Michael Robinson's daughter. Overwhelmed by Harriet's confidence, she slowly approached Ava. "What's going on?" Ava asked, seeing Miss Sorensen's uneasy expression. "Mrs. Harrington here," Miss Sorensen began delicately, "believes you might have taken something. Winged you? Well, check your bag." Ava stared at the manager, stunned. "I haven't done anything wrong," she said, her heart drumming fast. The humiliation of being singled out in front of so many people made her cheeks burn. "But if you really want to look, go ahead." She unzipped her bag and held it out. Harriet stood to the side, a smug grin creeping onto her face as Miss Sorensen rummaged through Ava's belongings. Miss Sorensen's inspection turned up exactly what Ava said it would. A phone, a small wallet, a pack of gum, and a set of keys. No dress tags, no stolen items. "There's nothing here," Miss Sorensen said softly, glancing up at Harriet with an apologetic frown. Harriet refused to back down. "Check again," she demanded, glaring at Miss Sorensen as though she were incompetent. "You must have missed something." Ava's patience was wearing thin. She let out a slow breath, struggling to keep her composure. "Are we really going to do this?" she asked Harriet, her voice level. "You've made a scene over nothing." "Girls like you always have some trick up their sleeve," Harriet snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. A ripple of shock spread among the customers. Ava felt her anger flare. She clenched her hands, fighting the urge to shout. "I'm standing up for myself, not hiding," she managed. Miss Sorensen, flushed with embarrassment, tried to calm Harriet. "Maybe it's time we all take a step back," she said, voice trembling. But Harriet wasn't done. She pointed an accusatory finger at Ava. "I want her out of this store," she nearly shouted. "She's causing trouble, and I won't have it. She doesn't belong here." Ava stood her ground. "I haven't done a single thing wrong," she insisted, meeting Harriet's eyes. "And I'm not leaving just because you've got a problem with me." Harriet's sneer deepened. "Then I guess the manager will have to make the call." Miss Sorensen swallowed hard. She was new, feeling intimidated by Harriet's long-standing status as a valued customer. Unsure how to handle the heated standoff and worried about losing Harriet's business, she made a poor decision. I think it might be best if you left, Miss Sorensen said, addressing Ava with a trembling voice. Ava blinked, disbelief robbing her of speech for a moment. You're asking me to leave? She said slowly, her voice tight with emotion. Even though you found nothing in my bag? Harriet's smug smile spread. Sounds like you should go, she said, a satisfied lilt in her voice. Ava's hands shook. She took a deep breath, refusing to let tears well up. You're only doing this because of the color of my skin, she said bluntly. The words hung in the air like a solemn truth. A wave of discomfort washed through the onlookers, many of them now directed condemning looks at Harriet. Undeterred, Harriet sniffed haughtily. I'm just protecting the store's reputation, she retorted. If that offends you, that's your problem. Just then, Ava pulled out her phone and tapped her father's number. Dad, she said, trying to keep her voice steady, I'm at Robinson & Co. boutique. There's a situation. Harriet rolled her eyes. Calling your little boyfriend to come rescue you? She muttered to a fellow shopper who clearly wanted no part in Harriet's hostility. But Harriet would soon realize she had no idea whose father Ava was calling. Minutes later, the air outside filled with the low rumble of a powerful engine. A glossy black SUV, its windows tinted, pulled up right in front of the boutique. Out stepped Mr. Scott, the longtime security chief for the Robinson family, scanning the store through the wide glass front. A sudden hush fell over the place, leaving only the soft background music drifting overhead. Harriet stiffened, a hint of confusion flickering in her eyes. The next moment, Michael Robinson himself emerged from the SUV. His tailored suit reflected his position. He was a man of influence, someone used to negotiating big business deals and winning them. Customers began whispering among themselves. Miss Sorensen's face went pale the instant she recognized him, though Harriet remained ignorant of Michael's identity for a few more critical seconds. Michael Robinson stepped inside, his tall, commanding figure making every head turn. Mr. Robinson. Miss Sorensen started, hurrying toward him. Michael, however, walked straight past her to Ava, who stood defiant yet visibly shaken. He placed a protective hand on her shoulder. What happened? He asked quietly, though his deep voice carried enough weight to silence the entire store. Harriet, misunderstanding, stepped forward. I'm so glad someone with authority is here, she said, trying to sound composed. That girl has been causing all sorts of trouble, and I was worried she'd steal something. We checked her bag, but who knows what she might have hidden elsewhere. I was just telling the manager that she doesn't belong here. Michael's expression remained neutral as he looked from Harriet to Miss Sorensen. Is that so? He asked calmly. Miss Sorensen swallowed, guilt lining her features. I didn't recognize your daughter, sir. I'm so sorry. Before she could finish, Harriet cut in with a dismissive wave. Daughter, don't be ridiculous. The manager's just trying to cover for her failure to spot a thief. I'm Mrs. Harriet Harrington, and I've been a loyal customer here for years, but I won't let this store's reputation be tarnished by the likes of... She froze mid-sentence. The reality hit her when she saw Michael's stern gaze fixed on her. A protective father ready to address the injustice aimed at his child. That girl you keep referring to, Michael began, his voice measured, is my daughter, Ava Robinson. He paused, letting the statement settle heavily into the hushed atmosphere. And this store you're so concerned about? I own it. A ripple of astonished gasps swept through the onlookers. Harriet's face turned a chalky shade of white. Her haughty demeanor evaporated in an instant. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Harriet stammered at last. I didn't know. She never said. She shouldn't have to, Michael said, the calm edge of his voice more intimidating than any shout. Every person who walks through these doors, whether they're my daughter or a complete stranger, deserves to be treated with respect. You, Mrs. Harrington, have done the opposite. Ava exhaled slowly, relief and validation washing over her. She remained by her father's side, shoulders squared as she looked Harriet straight in the eye. Miss Sorensen, clearing her throat, tried to salvage the situation. Mr. Robinson, I am truly sorry. I should have handled this better. Yes, you should have, Michael said, his tone stern. He turned to Harriet, who now seemed frozen in place. You made baseless accusations and humiliated my daughter in front of everyone. Instead of apologizing for your mistake, you doubled down, insisted she be thrown out, and, if I heard correctly, called her a thief. Harriet's lips trembled. I was only trying to protect the store, she managed, grasping for some defense. Michael's gaze hardened. By making assumptions based on prejudice, you've done more harm to my store's reputation than anyone else could. A heavy silence loomed. The surrounding customers looked on, many of them clearly siding with Ava. An older woman near the display of purses shook her head in disapproval at Harriet's behavior. Two younger customers whispered, sending sympathetic glances Ava's way. Michael let out a controlled breath, then squared his shoulders. Mrs. Harrington, he said, you are no longer welcome in this boutique, or any other store I own. Your behavior is unacceptable, and I will not tolerate it. Harriet's eyes widened in panic. She opened her mouth, but again, nothing emerged. She looked around for support, but found only faces reflecting shock and disdain. Realizing there was no escape, she pressed her lips together. Finally, she summoned a weak, I didn't mean any harm, but it was too late. Everyone could see through the hollow excuse. Michael waved over Mr. Scott, who stepped forward with the quiet authority of someone used to diffusing tense situations. Please escort Mrs. Harrington out, Michael instructed. Make sure she understands she is not allowed back. Harriet gaped in silent outrage before turning on her heel. Her expensive shoes clicked loudly against the polished floor. The hush that settled behind her was absolute, save for the soft rustle of clothing on the racks. At the doorway, she shot one final glance over her shoulder, only to see Michael standing protectively beside Ava, an unbreakable father-daughter bond. Then Harriet pushed through the glass doors, stepping into the spring daylight, diminished in every sense of the word. All eyes now shifted to Miss Sorensen. She visibly trembled, clutching her clipboard. Mr. Robinson, I'm truly sorry. Had I known... Michael raised a hand. It's not just about who she is. You shouldn't require the VIP list to treat someone with decency. His voice was firm, yet there was an undercurrent of disappointment. When you manage one of my boutiques, you represent the values I stand for, and I stand for fairness and respect. If a customer claims someone is stealing, you have a responsibility to investigate properly. But you have no right to shame or expel someone without evidence, especially not under the influence of a prejudiced rant. Miss Sorensen nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I understand. I promise it won't happen again. Michael paused, then gave a slow nod. Make sure it doesn't. He looked around at the onlookers. Some gave him encouraging nods, others quickly pretended to be absorbed in shopping, keen to avoid attention. At that moment, a sense of relief washed over Ava. She had stood her ground, but having her father back her up made the victory sweeter and safer. Michael turned back to his daughter. Are you all right? He asked gently. Ava nodded. I am now, she replied, managing a small smile. Thanks, Dad. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I'm proud of you, he said, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You stood up for yourself with dignity. No one should have to face that kind of prejudice. The tension in the store slowly dissipated as Miss Sorensen returned to her managerial duties, reminding the staff to check on customers politely. No more frantic accusations. A few bystanders cautiously approached Ava, offering words of support or simple nods of acknowledgement. One woman, who introduced herself as a mom of 2 teenage daughters, even apologized on behalf of any adult who had ever judged Ava unfairly. Ava thanked her, touched by the sentiment. As the father-daughter duo moved toward the back office to discuss the incident, Ava glanced over her shoulder. She wondered how many more Harriet Harringtons roamed the world, ready to assume the worst about someone they knew nothing about. The injustice stung, but Ava also felt a spark of determination. She vowed she would speak up. Not just for herself, but for anyone facing that kind of baseless discrimination. Michael seemed to sense her thoughts. "You did well today," he assured her. "It's not easy standing up when someone's barking false accusations, but you kept your composure, and that's important." Ava nodded, the corners of her lips tipping into a grateful smile. "I guess I learned from the best," she said softly, squeezing his hand. They entered the private office at the back of the boutique. The room was cozy yet modern, plush chairs, abstract art on the walls, a small coffee machine humming in the corner. Michael motioned for Ava to sit down. He took a seat across from her, steepling his fingers. "This store," he began, "it's part of my name, yes, but it's also part of my legacy. And you're part of that legacy. I never want you to feel out of place in something I've built." Ava's eyes flickered with warmth. "I appreciate that, Dad. But it's not just about me. What if this had happened to someone else?" She swallowed hard, remembering the humiliation and fear she'd felt just moments ago. "Someone who didn't have your phone number or your resources?" Michael nodded solemnly. "That's why we have to make changes. To our staff training, to our protocols. No one, especially not a young person, should be treated like a criminal just for existing in a space." They shared a determined look. Both understood that while Harriet Harrington had been escorted out, the larger issue, prejudice, was still out there. This incident was merely one battle in a broader war against bias. The confrontation in the boutique served as a reminder. Sometimes standing up for yourself can feel terrifying, but staying silent only emboldens the bullies. Ava emerged from the ordeal stronger, with her father's unwavering support.